Jules Wade was a librarian before the outbreak that was lucky enough to attach himself to a group of survivors that had taken shelter in the country club south of Riverside. After internal strife caused a horde of undead to overwhelm their home, Jules finds himself injured and on the run, having sustained a stab wound to his arm and scratches on both his hand and shin. Able to catch his breath at a nearby service center, he knows that his time of relying on others is past, and now only his wits and will to survive will keep him alive. Searching the nearby buildings, he scrapes together some basic tools which he stores in the trunk of the Jeep he has discovered the key to. While preparing what he assumed was his ticket out of here, the first stray undead stumbles from the fog and forces Jules to fight in his injured state, sending shooting stabs of pain up his arm until he resorts to stomping the undead's face. Finding his ride out of gas and the bandage on his forearm already soiled with blood of the undead, Jules knows that he must strike out into the country club in search of fuel and food. Only making it a short way down the road before his injured leg ached and the light began to fade, Jules decides it's smarter to hold up in his temporary home so he wasn't stumbling around in the dark. On his way back, Jules' worst fears are realized as he spots shambling silhouettes moving through the distant fog, streaming from the north and signaling the migration of the deadly horde. Witnessing the same horrors that had ended his group, Jules is faced with an endless stream of undead rolling through the trees like a wave of relentless death. In his current state, fighting even one of these zombies was a monumental task, but now drowsiness and pain made it a near impossibility. Forced to run, and ignoring the agony building in his leg, he eventually isolates a handful that he can dispatch before he begins the tedious trek back to his shelter. Discovering his previous safety now haunted by the infected, Jules finds himself cast out into the cold night, hungry, exhausted, terrified, and nearly defenseless. Finding every road and path plagued with undead, he can barely manage to swing his frying pan as his body begins to go into full mutiny. Crawling through the thick woods, he eventually stumbles upon a stream and what appears to be relative safety from the deadly shadows that pursue him. Checking on his arm, the hopelessness only mounts as he smells the pungent smell of infection seeping from his mistreated wound. Raggedly determined to find shelter as the cold night begins to sink into his bones, he finds even the footpaths guarded by the shambling horrors of this fresh nightmare. Struggling to keep his eyes open, his fragile composure shatters as he hears the blaring of a security system from the building he had been working towards. Watching as the undead hounds march towards the signal like a tireless army, Jules once again crawls along the nearby creek in hopes of finding another moment to catch his ragged breath. Finding a place to rest as the first lights of dawn peek through the autumn trees, Jules underestimates the draw of sleep before he suddenly finds himself waking up on the damp earth late into the day. Knowing he has to escape this tormented golf course, Jules roughly locates the direction of Riverside and begins to drag his ragged body across the unkept grounds, all the while feeling his stomach tightening as the beginnings of starvation set in. Desperation drives him to discover some nettles and a grasshopper, which he forces between his lips, while the overwhelming stress finally forces a single tear to roll down his grimy cheek. Night begins to creep in again, as every stray shambler serves as a large drain on Jules' already slim reserves of energy, causing another outburst of tears as the horrors of this world never seem to end. Collapsing on the ground once again, Jules struggles to truly sleep until a splattering of rain fully stirs him from his tattered state. Continuing his trudge, he finally stumbles upon an isolated stretch of road that provides the only true swell of happiness since his flight had begun. Spying a nearby postal van, he uses the last of his energy to dispose of the lingering workers before securing the key to the worn vehicle that might be his salvation. The van was in shambles, but the engine eventually roars to life and finally allows Jules to create distance between him and the swarms of undead plaguing his previous home. Too tired to fight with his hands, Jules throws the already battered van into the undead officers, with the sliver of hope that their cruisers held a morsel of food for his violently empty stomach. Squashing the last of them beneath rotted tires, he discovers the key to the roadblock, but is predictably devastated when neither of the vehicles provide the sustenance he needs. Fully aware of his ignorance when it comes to firearms, he makes the forward-thinking decision to collect them anyway, acknowledging their undeniable effectiveness when applied correctly. Puttering down the road, he spots a break in the fence that draws his attention. Atop the nearby hill and through the thick woods, he can spot a radio tower, which if this world was merciful, would have some sliver of food. Reaching the fenced-in facility, he begins to search the nearby buildings, and first places his shaky hands on a simple yet elegant tool, the crowbar. unnatural balance of the weapon as he moves into the main building, his hope is dragged low over and over again as his hunt for food bears no fruit. Stomach in knots and beginning to feel his systems failing, he desperately marches into the spattering rain in hopes of finding literally anything to eat. He wouldn't last the night without something. A dash of movement catches his eye before his numbing fingers snatch a wriggling centipede from the cold earth. It would barely make a difference, but Jules' desperation had reached a climax that threatened to ruin him. Crunching down the writhing insect, the ragged survivor crawls into an actual bed and finds sleep rapidly taking him as his sluggish mind tries to come up with some sort of solution. Suffering in agonizing pain, he can't sleep through the night as his body demands calories and energy that Jules simply no longer has. Without a plan, and partially convinced it would be his demise, he drags his body back to the van and strikes out in the darkness in hopes of discovering more potential for food. One of the worn tires pops as Jules maneuvers down a country road, causing a loud pop that instantly draws the attention of the scattered undead. Trying to fight through his extreme fatigue, Jules is eventually forced to lose his pursuers in the woods once more, but finds a hidden cache of determination within himself as he circles back towards the stranded van. Discovering an affinity for the crowbar he wielded, Jules' final blaze ignites in his heart as he throws his final ounces of energy towards his last chance of salvation. Fighting continuously into the morning, Jules' arms ache, his legs shake, and his mind grows fuzzier and fuzzier by the moment. He's dying, slowly but surely. Gulping down a can of peaches, Jules already knows he'll regret his lack of control in the moment, but he cannot stop himself as he scarfs down not only the evaporated milk, but also the can of dog food alongside it. Knowing it was only a matter of time before his stomach growled violently again, Jules uses his burst of energy to strike out into the foggy morning, needing to reach another home to truly secure his survival. Surprisingly finding his stab wound healed enough to remove the bandage, Jules' high hopes don't last long as he realizes each and every road is guarded by hordes of the infected. Unable to find a direction, and knowing the risks of fighting in the unknown of the fog, he returns back to the house he had cleared to allow himself to rest and for the dense veil to fade. Regaining a morsel of the life he once lived, Jules indulges in the temporary escape of a book before he collapses into a nearby bed to prepare for the nightmare to come. Using the time he had bought himself, Jules takes a methodical and careful approach to dispersing the dead around his next source of food, making sure to divide and conquer as the sun slowly sinks lower into the sky. Finally securing a house on the edge of the field, Jules feasts on chips and soda in triumph as he accumulates the beginnings of a stockpile of calories. Despite the coming darkness, Jules doesn't want to leave the shambling horde lingering in the nearby field. If he was to sleep in one of these houses through the night, he couldn't risk their numbers stumbling into his shelter. Fighting and clearing the neighboring home, Jules is finally able to almost fully relax, as his exhausted body begs for much-needed rest and sleep. Greeted with another foggy morning and more death, Jules checks the nearby shed before turning his attention back indoors to finally wash away the grime and blood that had grown thick upon his face. Waiting out the fog yet again, Jules dives into one of the books on electricity he discovered during his journey, feeding off the recorded knowledge as the hours tick by. Determined to return to the safety of the radio station, Jules must first weave through the endless hordes before completing the journey on foot. Having to leave a valuable amount of supplies in the stranded van, Jules commits to returning with another working vehicle at some point, before beginning his long trudge. Truly rest since being overrun at the country club. Finally, it's quiet enough to put pen to paper. I genuinely feared I would never get the privilege again. I'm no longer starving, but by no means safe and secure like we had been. If only that utter degenerate could have kept his rampant emotions in check. You know, if I leave one last thing in this world, let it be this. Kevin, if you're still alive, you are by far the most inconsiderate, vile, and worthless human being I have had the displeasure of knowing. Fuck you, Jules. Returning from his day of bloodshed and violence, Jules crawls into the comfort of literature, late into the night. Today's mission was to get another vehicle working, otherwise the burned calories of scavenging on foot would leave him to ultimately starve. Pushing himself through the lengthy walk to the rural homes he had been fighting towards, he remembers seeing a truck up the road that he hopes is in working order. Unable to find any keys, but able to siphon some gas from one of the cars, Jules already feels his strength waning, but is determined to make progress up the gravel road. Returning back to the truck for a power nap, Jules' resolve is starting to weaken as the barrier of undead seems endless and impossible. Finding himself utterly exhausted as the final hours of light cast over the dense woods, Jules can barely keep his crowbar aloft as he fights for just a moment of peace. With night fast approaching, he makes the risky decision to cut through the woods to a house he spotted above the tree line. If he could make it inside, not only could he secure more food, but also a place to sleep. Knowing now that he'd get to the radio station long after night fell, Jules retrieves his bag that he was forced to drop and begins the uneasy trip back to the safety in the encroaching darkness. Terrified not only by the growling shadows that lurked in the woods, Jules finds himself deeply troubled about his current situation. Every step forward was at the cost of 2 steps back, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't rely on others to free him from his burdens. At least as he crawls back to the growing comfort of the radio station, he knows that tomorrow will bring a working vehicle with gas he had secured, though the cruisers he had the keys to were equally battered as himself. Confirming the sorry state his modes of transportation were in, Jules ends up fueling and replacing the battery on the one that looks marginally less likely to crumple into pieces while moving down the road. Content with simply retrieving the supplies he had abandoned in the van days ago, Jules decides that today would be the day that he discovered the entrance to the service road leading to the tower. If he could reliably use a vehicle to drive right up to his front door, then a whole new world of possibilities opened up for the desperate survivor. Exploring in the natural direction he assumed the access road would be, the only finding of interest is an overturned car that holds little but the reminder that the dead aren't the only deadly threat left in this nightmare. Finding his mind wandering to what his purpose might be after he achieves a safe enough situation for winter, Jules sinks into an uneasy calm as the empty road comes as a welcome change compared to his previously bloody days. Having forgotten about the resort town west of the country club, Jules is left shaken and broken as his near brush with death and denial to his home proves too much for his fragile state. Falling back into an almost trance-like state, his abused mind yearns for the comfort of another book, latching onto the warm embrace of the printed word to help pull him back from the brink. Looking over his pitiful food reserves, Jules knows there's no other option but to strike back towards the Valley of Death he had created along the rural road. least thankful his legs weren't already shaking by the time he reached his destination, Jules looks through the splintered windshield at his tireless enemy and takes a fortifying breath. Adopting an almost numb state of mind as his clothes become drenched in blood, Jules finds himself longing for the days that Marcus would deal with these horrors. But Marcus was gone, and Jules could only rely on himself. Returning to the house he had fled yesterday, he discovers that the horde he had spotted had made their way inside, serving as the final confirmation that Jules' progress was done for the day. Watching dark clouds roll overhead before a light rain begins to fall, Jules can feel the growing gusts of wind that indicate a storm crawling over Knox County. Securing at least a couple days worth of food, Jules almost welcomes the coming storm as an excuse to stay sheltered in his isolated safe haven, having cherished the sound of rain peppering his roof long before the outbreak had occurred. Finishing a beginner's book on carpentry, Jules feels a burst of inspiration to try and apply his new skills before he is faced with the harsh reality that knowing how to do something and actually doing it is two entirely different beasts. Heading to bed disappointed and bitter at himself, Jules grapples with the knowledge that his book smarts can only get him so far, and he must suffer through the agony of mediocrity before gaining any genuine skills. Using his self-centered anger to spur him forward, Jules attacks the expendable furniture of the station with a vengeance as the storm continues to grow outside. Practicing some axe swings on the saplings dotting the yard, he eventually moves to fall an aged pine, but once again is met with clumsy and unpracticed strikes that fill him with rage. Beginning to store the firewood beneath the awning of his building, Jules assumes he'll need the fuel for fire if he makes it through the winter, but fully acknowledges that his chances of making it to November are already looking slim. It's the first day of October, and the brink of winter is announced with a bitter and relentless thunderstorm. I find myself in the precarious position between living and dying, though I suppose that's nothing new. I'm just now faced with the reality of being removed from those around me. Before the dash from the country club, I had perhaps dispatched a few dozen of the infected. Now I'm sure my body count is in the triple digits. My clothes and hands are constantly covered in blood. It makes me long for a time not so long ago that we had running water. Hopefully, tomorrow, the rain lets up. Jules. Getting his wish of a mostly clear sky, Jules wakes up to the now routine growling of his stomach and the cutting chill of the autumn morning. Unable to spend any more time not actively fighting towards food, Jules sets off from the radio station and back into the horrors outside his walls. Once again turning down the rural road he had cleared previously, he hopes that making progress will go smoothly, but finds that the surrounding woods leak seemingly endless undead. even making it to the first intersection before he begins to feel fatigued, Jules' will to push forward is washed away as he aimlessly retreats from the endless bloodshed. Without a real plan, he stumbles upon the road that leads to his station and decides to explore it back to the main road. Though he cannot get a vehicle of the service road yet, he hopes that scouting might provide an alternate source of food. Just outside the perimeter fence, Jules spots a fresh corpse being feasted on by a handful of the undead. They couldn't have been dead for more than a day, and had only been an hour's walk from the safety of the hilltop. Knowing that they would have been another mouth to feed, Jules is almost thankful they hadn't made it to his home, but the discovery exposes Jules to the bitterness he had brewed for people following the events at the country club. Reaching the main road after a lengthy walk, and as the sun hangs low in the sky, Jules isn't surprised to find the undead shambling along the asphalt, but decides to explore a bit further through the fields in hopes of finding anything for his efforts. Empty-handed and losing the light, Jules turns to head back up the winding road, mulling over the fact that another day had been wasted without discovering more food. Staving off starvation by rationing his actual food and the insects he can find in the woods, Jules knows that tomorrow will be another slaughter in the pursuit of calories. Crafting a handful of crude spears, Jules sets out from his home with a cold determination in his heart. Finding the undead he had fled from yesterday now plagued the main road, he aims to forge a new path, while avoiding damaging his already precarious vehicle. Knowing that a handful of houses lie on the other side of the open farmland, Jules decides that fighting through the hordes out in the open is safer than picking off stragglers on the claustrophobic roads of the rural woods. Fighting all day to reach a garage late into the afternoon, Jules feels the slightest bit of hope, but knows that the house was his ultimate goal, and it was still guarded by the hounds of hell. Fingers numb and arm aching, he begins the arduous process of clearing the undead from the farm, but sees no end in sight as more and more corpses litter the ground. Concerned about the undead he was slowly leading back to his home, Jules is too tired to deal with the threat now, but adds the encroaching doom to the growing list of agony that was his life. Waking up shivering, Jules eats one of his last 2 cans of food and knows that he must reach the farmhouse today, even if it kills him. Weak hands clumsy with crude spears, Jules takes on more than he's used to, as desperation is his sole drive. Falling back on his bent and battered crowbar after the horde nearly takes his life, Jules finds himself on the verge of breaking down before he's even made progress towards the house. Finally making it inside, Jules' mental fortitude is in no state to handle the slim amount of food he can find, feeling utterly gutted and hollow as he robotically checks the home and strikes back out towards his car. Today was the closest call yet since the country club. nearly taken down by a group of those mindless monsters, all for a box of cereal and a can of oats. Never have I been so safe and so terrified at the same time. Having this radio station to retreat back to is both a blessing and a curse. Being isolated here, knowing that the undead would never pierce the thick veil of trees, makes me never want to leave my comfort. Is my fate to waste away up here and die a slow and miserable death? Or am I going to be swallowed whole by those creatures that now dominate our world? Their world. Only time will tell. Jules. Checking his injury in the morning, Jules is pleased to see it healed, but finds his body noticeably thinner and caked in blood and grime. Unable to face the disappointment of looting another home, he instead focuses on the more immediate threat of the encroaching undead on his road. Needing a break from bloodshed, the ragged survivor replaces his torn clothes with what he scavenged from the dead, and sets to work on mundane tasks that he longed were his only concern. Waking up to another cold and dreary rain, Jules feels almost nothing as he pointlessly shifts around his room and prepares for another day away from home. I feel as though this entry is necessary, since a growing and stubborn doom is beginning to grow in my heart. Every morning I wake up fearing it will be my last, and I don't want the records of my life and those I've known to be forgotten. For posterity's sake, here are the accounts of what occurred following the outbreak. I, Jules Wade, fled the school in Riverside after I recognized the refugee center there was going to collapse. In my pursuit of seeking out the safest location to survive, I found myself making my way to the country club. That's where I first met Marcus. Marcus Conway was the groundskeeper for the country club and discovered me wandering around the course in an attempt to find the main building. He took me in, no questions asked. When we arrived, I met Mr. and Mrs. Martin, Greg and Kathy to be precise. I liked Greg. He was a farmer from the center of the county and could easily be described as one of those hard-working gentlemen that you knew wouldn't stop working until he dropped dead. Also, he was quiet, which I prefer. His wife, Kathy, was far less composed. She constantly worried about her daughter in Louisville, understandably. Last, and certainly least, was Kevin. Kevin was Marcus's brother, and he had come to find him at the country club when the outbreak started to run rampant. I don't know the full extent of his life, but he was very proud of his 20-year sentence in the Rosewood Correctional Facility. He never went into details of his crimes. Kevin was loud, rough, violent, rude, agitated. Everything his brother wasn't. Though they were brothers, no two personalities could have stood in harsher contrast with one another. My hand is growing tired, so I shall try to conclude. Most importantly, Marcus is the reason that I'm here today, having saved me from one of the infected early on and suffering a bite to his chest in the process. Though it allowed me to live, I hate him for it. All I can think about is how differently things would have turned out if he had simply let me die. If Kevin hadn't rightfully blamed me for his death, maybe the Martins would still be alive. If I do perish in these coming days, I wanted to make sure I recorded the selflessness of Marcus Conway, a good man with a good heart who saved a coward who might end up starving anyway. Now at least my guilt won't die with me, being immortalized on these pages. Jules. Feeling the pangs of true hunger setting in once again, Jules powers through the rain and the horde standing between him and his next chance at a sliver of food. Finally making it to the small home, the world spits in his face once again by providing nothing but 3 bottles of wine, which provided calories but absolutely no vital nutrients to the fragile survivor. Needing to scrape together a morsel of food, he places his bets on the next house up the road, steadying himself for another bloodbath to reach its door. Crushed once more by this endless nightmare, the entire day's efforts resulted in not a crumb of actual food, leaving Jules to stave off his starvation and mounting depression by downing an entire bottle of wine as he travels over the devastation he has left in his wake. Soaked and defeated as he returns to the fragile safety of his cruiser, he hears the rattling engine threatening to sputter before a familiar and dreadful noise fills the air. Having lost his access to transportation once again, Jules lets his tears finally mix with the flow of rain that washed over his ragged features as he crawls back to his isolated station. Recognizing that this was it, that this next decision would either leave him starved or fed, he spends the night relying on the one tool that had kept him alive so far: his mind. Scraping across every shred of knowledge he held, he eventually recalls Marcus mentioning a trailer park he had lived in that had to be nearby. It had been constructed for the factories between Jules and the country club, which meant it was more than likely a walkable distance through the woods to the east. With so many individual residences, there had to be food for Jules. The only question was how guarded were the modest homes, and if he had the strength to fight for them. Trudging through the foggy and tiring walk, Jules eventually hears a sound that had filled him with dread 2 weeks ago, but now gives him a spark of hope he wasn't expecting. Some stubborn house alarm had gone off on the far side of the park, drawing the swarms of dead away from the nearest trailers, giving Jules the vital offering of luck he so desperately needed. Finding the food he had predicted, he picks through the first 2 homes in a pristine-looking vehicle before deciding to free the closest row of homes from a small gathering of the infected. Calming his growling stomach with the immediate gratification of greasy and delicious chips, Jules finds enough food to stuff his duffel bag as an infectious and wide smile stretches across his blood-soaked face. Beginning his trek back, he spots the horde that laid claim to this new gold mine, but not even their intimidating numbers could bring Jules down, as he knows he now has the time and the energy available to deal with them properly. Slowly climbing the hill towards his home as the October chill sweeps through the vibrant trees around him, Jules is allowed the first true indulgence of hope he had been so long absent from. Confident he wouldn't be forced from his safe haven now, he finally commits to making this place a home as he begins to organize his small and cozy room. I write this entry while holding back tears of utter and complete joy. For the first time since the country club, I can't remove the unfamiliar feeling of a smile across my tired lips. Feeling happy brings an almost sickening sensation, however, as it feels almost wrong to be satisfied and safe after all that has happened. Though I must prevent myself from souring the accomplishments I have made, the proof I have provided that Marcus's sacrifice was not pointless, that I can survive out here on my own. Now, I finally have time to plan and to think, to decide what comes next. Jules.